It's great to have the opportunity to share my entrepreneurial story. I'm going to focus on the, I'll say, conversion of my professional life from a corporate life, which I think is similar to Shelley, into an entrepreneurial journey. I'll start by giving a little bit of background on my career. I'm a chartered accountant by training. I graduated nearly 30 years ago, as you can tell by this. I started my career with Coopers and Lybrand chartered accountants. They're the ones with the little bit of an Oscar problem a month ago. I started out in Saskatchewan. I'm a prairie boy, and spent 10 years providing business advisory, tax, accounting, and auditing services to the smallest of the small companies, as well as to the biggest of the big. During my time with Coopers and Lybrand, I had the opportunity to explore the world. I went on secondments to Australia, New Zealand, and Barbados. When I look back at that 10 years, I spent a lot of time getting to know various different businesses in a wide range of industries. One of the things I liked most during that period of time was the getting to know the business and spending time with the business leaders. One of the last things that we would do as part of each engagement would be to sit down with either the owner of the business or the president, and whether I would be one of the junior people on the team or one of the senior, I'd start with the first question. I knew enough to be able to ask the first question, and once I heard the answer to the first question, I could ask the second. And over a period of time, that would give me enough insight into the industry and the company to enable us as an audit team to complete the engagement. I saw lots of fascinating things that these clients were doing, but what I realized was that those things that were occurring, those weren't my companies that were doing them, they were somebody else's. So the 10-year mark, I decided to leave public accounting and go into industry. For a period of close to 20 years, I worked for a variety of companies in the retail and financial services sector. So companies like Sears, JP Morgan, and the Hudson Bay Company. My roles went back and forth from being a pure bean counter to being the finance guy at the table, helping drive the organization to achieve its financial goals. I was part of teams that helped buy businesses, help sell businesses, restructure, and part of the overall strategic planning. It was fascinating to be part of those things, but I also got to see things that over a period of time I think shaped my mindset into doing what I'm doing. I was the finance guy that often was the first person to know how many 100 people were going to be let go in corporate Canada. So I think that started to shape my thinking. And I would say as early as maybe 10 or 11 years ago, I started thinking, if something happens at the age 50, I can see doing something completely different. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking what that doing something completely different might be, but that was always in the back of my mind. So for a period of probably maybe as far back as 15 years. I ended up working for a company for about 3 or 4 years that resulted in travel back and forth to Calgary. I would travel 50, 60, 70 nights a year. I'd be working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, working nights, weekends, weekend nights. And then I said, at age of 50, happy birthday to me. I turned 50. The company I was working for happened to do a major restructuring. They were looking at doing a major transaction, and they needed to restructure their finance team. Well, that was a great opportunity for me because I'd been thinking, age 50, do something different. So I guess it was about 16 or 17 months ago, right before Christmas, an opportunity of a lifetime, and I became a free agent. So several things were going through my mind at that point. One, the 10 years of thinking about doing something different. The second, I guess, was for a number of years, I'd been thinking, I want to retire at 55. Maybe not 55, 56, 57. And that had been really a driving force in a number of decisions that my wife and I had made. Second, I guess, was that the nature of accounting work, there was lots of stuff I really enjoyed. I really liked working with the business. But I didn't like doing month ends, and I didn't like the grind of month ends. It's just, you finish one, you start the next. So that was guiding me. And finally, I guess I started to get to know some folks in the business community, some business leaders that were working well into their 60s. And when I started to hear their stories as to what they were doing and how engaged they were, and one of our close friends at age 65, he signed a 5-year contract extension to keep working till he's 70, and he's not convinced that he's going to retire at age 70. So I started to think, well, what's wrong with my thinking if I'm focused on retiring at 55? Why don't I look to do something that maybe I'll retire at 55, but it becomes a choice at that time? So when I left my previous role in December of 2015, I decided to start with a blank sheet of paper, 11 by 17. I think the entire world can be summarized on 11 by 17 piece of paper. I wanted to really look at as wide a range of possibilities as I could. I joke that I considered as wide a range from being a stand-up comedian all the way to being a CFO, which is definitely the opposite end of the spectrum. I actually came across, by chance, a documentary on being a stand-up comedian. And it said that unless you are Dana Carvey and the headliner, you basically make no money. And you work evenings, weekends, and weekend evenings. So there was a trend forming. I did some analysis. I wanted to do, took a deep dive, just kind of looking back at my past. I looked at really all the things that I had accomplished personally and professionally. Did a complete timeline. I looked at who the various people were that had impacted my life, again, personally and professionally. I also looked at all the things at different stages in my life I'd been interested in. And it ended up being a long list, which you would think is helpful, but it's not. It'd be easier if there were just a couple of things that I was interested in, but it was probably a list of 35 or 40 things. But what I liked about going through that analysis was it gave me kind of broader perspective on, I'll say, my life and life, I guess, in general, and kind of cut down on the impact of recency. So I think if I just kind of dove in to kind of, well, let's just pick something right after I left, I probably wouldn't have considered as wide a range of opportunities. One of the areas that was of interest to me was personal financial planning. So even though personal financial planning was only a small part of my professional life, I had a job managing a $1.4 billion pension plan. Not exactly sure why I got the job, but so the concept of investment management was very intriguing. So it was an area that I decided to, not particularly crucial. It was just an area that I decided that I would do some research in. I knew some people that had been in the business, had some conversations with them. I decided that I would take some courses because I thought, it's one thing to have an interest, one of the 35 or 40 things that made it to my list, but it was another thing to do something full-time. So I signed up to take a financial planning designation and did the courses, figured at a minimum it'd be useful to manage my own finances. As I continued to have conversations with people, I realized 90% of my time was going to be spent doing client acquisition. And it would be a tough sell because you're actually convincing people to A, share all their financial details with you, and B, give you their money to look after. And I thought both of those would be tall order. And it would be working a lot of nights and a lot of weekends. There's a thread. Also talked to a close friend of mine and former colleague who had gone down this journey probably 2 years before me. He said working as a financial planner for him, not to say that's the same for everybody, but he said he would have made more money working as a retail sales clerk than he made in financial planning his second year. So I thought, yeah, maybe I should look at something different. A few years before, I'd come in contact with a franchise consultant, and I'm not here to be a franchise poster boy, but it did lead me down a path of some interesting conversations. So a franchise consultant's role is really to serve as a matchmaker between people that are looking at getting into business, franchisees, and franchisors who are looking for good candidates to own their franchises. Mike and I had some interesting conversations. The first was about passion, and lots of people in business, they talk about finding their passion and letting their passion drive them. Mike had some interesting comments about passion. The first example, he asked, who would be the best person to own an ice cream business? Most people think someone that loves ice cream. Mike's response was, well, wouldn't somebody like a high school teacher who has a passion for working with high school students, which is likely who's going to work in an ice cream store, wouldn't that actually be a better candidate for running an ice cream business? The second example he gave was, and this one was near and dear to my heart, I love golf. It's probably my biggest hobby, occupies a significant amount of my time. So the question he asked is whether someone who likes golf should actually work in the golf business. It might make sense, except for the fact that people that work in the golf business, when are they busiest at work? It's when they would like to be out on the golf course. So anyway, interesting conversation along that path. Mike did, and I did some additional assessments beyond what I had done myself, working on finding aptitudes and more work on interests. And one of his interesting findings, I thought, was at that point, which was 2 or 3 months after leaving corporate world, what he saw was that I was, I'll say, running away or trying to leave the corporate world. I wasn't running towards something. It's a subtle but important difference. So Mike then started to zero in on some potential business opportunities for me. The first one was selling window coverings, and I said I can't go into. I'm not a fashionable person. I can't do home decor, and so anyway, he said, okay, well, how about owning a barber shop? And I said, well, my wife's laughing. Is it really appropriate for somebody that has as little hair as I have to be in the barbershop business? And what he looked at, owning businesses like a barbershop, what was appealing for him to set me up is more the management model. Because it's a type of business, he didn't expect, nor a franchisor expect me to be standing in my barber shop directing stylists to cut hair. You're taking too much long, taking too much off, you need to cut off the ponytail. The idea is the managing the metrics of running a barber shop, get it up and going, manage the team. Still, it didn't seem that was how I wanted to be spending the next 10 years of my life. So after making the comment about I can't sell window coverings, I said, but I could sell a professional service. Bingo, a light bulb went on. And Mike introduced me to a concept called the alternative board, or TAB for short. TAB brings owners of small and medium-sized businesses together in a small group setting like a board of directors, something I was used to in a corporate setting. I'd been dealing with boards of directors and their committees for pretty much 30 years of my career. So I knew what effective guidance at a strategic level could do for business leaders and business owners. So I started down the path of my due diligence. As part of my due diligence, I reached out, I connected with current owners of TAB businesses. It operates on a territory basis. So I must have made calls to 5 or 6 different TAB business owners across Canada and a couple in the US. And I just had the opportunity to go and sit in on one of the board meetings that these coach facilitators were facilitating. And what I discovered was that folks that were sitting around the table were completely engaged and getting significant amount of feedback from their peers around the table. And I guess next stage of the due diligence was, and this happens with most franchise businesses, is you actually go to the corporate headquarters to meet the corporate folks. It's called Discovery Day. It's a two-way interview. They're interviewing you to see whether you'll be successful, and obviously you're interviewing them because you're getting into business with them. So I flew down to Denver and had dinner with the folks, and then I woke up at 5 in the morning. As I'm getting ready, the first thing that comes into my mind is, as an accountant, I've done lots of scorekeeping for business. I've done lots of checking to see that the scorekeeping is right. But what I've enjoyed most over my career is the working with the people that are playing the game. Bingo. I just discovered my why, as Simon Sinek talks about. My why, my purpose, what drives me, what causes me to get out of bed in the morning. This had been my mantra for at least 20 years. And so for some reason, it hadn't come to my mind until 5 o'clock in the morning, but everything as I went through the TAB due diligence process resonated. I'd read their strategic business leadership book, which is the guiding principles on how TAB connects owners' companies and their professional life to their personal vision. So after completing a successful discovery day, came back, did a final review of the documents, and purchased my franchise. I launched in June of last year, so I'm close to a year in business. Several of the key learnings, I guess, that I've found. First would be celebrate successes and try to learn from your failures. I would say, to Shelley's point, Shelley used the phrase, build your tribe. I would say build a support network. It is the business of what I do. And I'm fortunate enough that we in TAB, we practice what we preach. So my support network, at the end of most days, my wife and I talk about the highs and lows of our day. I have a mentor within TAB that I get together with on a monthly basis, and I have access to him on on an hourly basis if necessary, but typically once a month is enough. We have weekly meetings on key aspects of our business. We also have our own peer groups within TAB where we get together on a monthly basis. And I also reach out to colleagues. I know that I have colleagues. I'm an accountant. I know folks that have marketing backgrounds and IT backgrounds. So if there's some different aspect of helping a business, I know who I can turn to. You can replicate the what I do or building a support network in a number of ways. So various chambers of commerce, they offer these type of business roundtable groups. You can form a mastermind group. You can reach out to your friends, former colleagues, mentors, build a group, or you can join an organization like TAB or one of our several competitors in the market. And I guess the final learning I would have would be mindset. I think this is a little bit to what Shelley spoke to. There are certainly good weeks and there are bad weeks. They do tend to even out over time. You need to make sure that you don't get too high on yourself in the good weeks, and you want to make sure you don't get too low in the bad weeks. I can think of a week I had probably about 8 or 10 weeks ago now that I was really expecting it to be a good week. I had lined some things up that I expected my results were going to be very positive that week. And the 2 people that I expected those positive results to come from, they called me up on the Monday morning and they said, "Doug, unfortunately, I can't meet you this week." Crap. Or WTF. Will Wednesday, Thursday, Friday work for you? So anyway, I thought, okay, well, I thought I was going to be 2 for 2 and I'm going to be 0 for 0 because I can't actually meet with those people. So I'll have to start, I'll have other activities. I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn activity, for some bizarre reason, was not successful that week. That's the only week out of all the campaigns that I've done that for some reason it just didn't work. So having a bad week on a couple of fronts work-wise, and then add to it our fridge died and our barbecue died, and I like to barbecue, and I like to eat, so the fridge is kind of important. So it was a pretty down week, and I know kind of in the big picture that the fridge and the barbecue is not a big deal, but it was just 2 bits of bad news in a week that I didn't really know bad news. Thankfully, I am a mindset guy, so I'm pretty quick to figure out when I start thinking negatively. And this definitely was trending that direction. So very quickly remembered the week and the days where, I had great success. My marketing campaigns went better than expected, realizing it averages out. So I've now been in business close to a year. I enjoy every day. I have the opportunity of meeting with business owners. In my marketing activities, I love to hear all the fascinating stories. There's a lot of great stories happening in the marketplace. I've got the opportunity to work with business owners, and whether we work together or just meeting for coffee to hear their stories, it's a great way to spend my day and to learn and grow. I will put up my contact information. I would love the opportunity to, there we are. How to find me. There's my website, email, phone. I think on the sheet you've got my Twitter handle. I do a lot more on LinkedIn. Feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn. Happy to continue the conversation. And if anybody would like to get together for a coffee, I'd love to hear more about your stories. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.